Monster Hunter Flagships. These are the monsters that have represented the various games in the various generations throughout the mainline series, so today I will be ranking them in my own tier list, and of course that this will be my own opinion, so if you do get offended by any of my rankings, don't be offended, just drop your own rankings down below, and I look forward to seeing how the community's tier lists differ across the community. I'll put the link to the actual tier list as well in the description so you can actually follow through if you want with the video, or even do it yourself in your own time. And yeah, without wasting any more time, let's jump straight into this video. So first up we have Astalos from the Fated 4 that will be representing Monster Hunter Generations. So with Astalos, he's definitely my favourite of the Fated 4, but I wouldn't say he's my favourite monster. So he's definitely not in the S tier. Monster design is solid, it's very cool concept, and like his element, I really think it's really fitting how they designed the monster. So I am going to pop him down in A tier. And coming in next we have Azure Rathalos. Azure Rathalos, definitely my least favourite of the 3 Rathalos variants in the mainline series. Nothing too personal against him. His fight can be a tiny bit annoying in many games, as I feel like Azure Rathalos is one of the variants that like to fly around a lot in comparison to the original. So I will be dropping him in C tier. Definitely not a terrible monster to be in D tier, but overall is of course a lot with the Monster Hunter monsters. I think a lot of them are cool, like they got good designs, good intentions. Coming in next we have Bloodbath Diablos. So with this monster, opinion is a bit neutral. I don't think I played Generations enough at the Deviant stage to really like form a gameplay opinion on Bloodbath, but from a design standpoint and just overall flagship standpoint, I think he is a cool monster, cool design. Diablos, if it was the regular version, it probably would have been a C tier, but since it is the Bloodbath version and I really like the intention they were going with, I will drop him into the B tier. I think, as with most Deviants, their designs are pretty solid, and of course especially with Bloodbath with missing one horn, I think that's an extremely cool and savage look to the monster. And of course Diablos is already quite a savage monster, so this just ups that factor a bit more, and overall I think it's a solid B tier entry, definitely towards the top half of B tier at the very least. Up next we have the iconic 3rd generation flagship, Brachydios. So this monster was the monster that introduced Slime into the Monster Hunter franchise, and of course Slime is now known as Blast. It is quite a popular element as it's pretty much raw damage plus explosions, so I don't know how you can say no to that pretty much. And especially in 3 Ultimate, I do remember it being quite overpowered, which is quite common in Monster Hunter games. Like with 4 Ultimate, when they introduced the Charge Blade and Insect Glaive, they were pretty overpowered. But yeah, in general, a really cool monster, really good design, and the way they made Brachydios utilize its slime in combat I thought was really clever. So definitely is going to be an A tier, and it's going to jump straight to the top for the time being above Astalos. It's definitely one of my more favourite flagships across the board. I don't think it's S tier. There is a different 3rd generation flagship that's going to be sitting in S tier, but it's definitely up there, so we'll leave it at the top of A tier for the time being and go on to our next one, which is going to be the next of our Fated 4, and that is Gammoth. So Gammoth, not an amazing monster from my personal opinion. I think the intention is cool, it's good diversity that we have this mammoth-like monster in the game, but I think from personal opinion and just in general fighting the monster, it's nothing too amazing, to me at least, and he is going to go at the bottom of C tier. Hopefully I haven't offended anyone. From who I've spoken with in the community and just comments I've seen here and there, I don't know anyone that has Gammoth as really high up on their list, but if there is, sorry if I offended you, but of course, as I said at the beginning of this video, just drop it down below as to what your ranking would be, opposed to how I've ranked mine. So yeah, I don't think there's too much to discuss on Gammoth. But moving on to our next one, we have the next of the Fated 4, our 3rd of the 4 members, and that is Glavenus. So Glavenus, really cool monster. Personally, not too appealing. I think it's cool that he has his tail sword that heats up and all that, and of course he is quite an integral part of the ending for the generation's opening. Very well implemented into that opening as well, like very memorable. If there is one part of that opening that I do remember, it would be his slash into the title screen. But in general, he's a fun monster to fight, but I don't think he's extremely high on the list in the grand scheme of things, but I don't think he's low on the list. So he will be dropped nicely into B tier at the top. Definitely one of the better monsters in the B tier, but I wouldn't consider him A tier. Next up, we have the one and only Gore Magala. So this is a 4th generation flagship, and I think a lot of you could probably expect this, but he is going to be our first S tier monster. Extremely cool design. Just in general, when he first debuted, it was such a cool monster to have in the Monster Hunter franchise. There was a lot of mystery to him. The design was really cool, especially with all the smoke clouding the monster. And the story implementation for Gore Magala as well was extremely well executed, at least in my opinion, and I know a lot of others agree. There might be some out there that are not a fan of the story in Monster Hunter 4, specifically Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, of course, for the Western players. But yeah, in general, Gore Magala definitely set standards for what an awesome flagship looks like, and of course it already had its really mysterious implementation where they weren't sure what type of monster it was until it evolved into Shigaru Magala, and of course that was just once again an extremely cool story development. So yeah, this is definitely quite an easy decision to make, and yeah, Gore Magala is going to stay right there and we can move on to our next one. So coming in next, we have a very good classic Elder Dragon, but also at this point an extremely annoying Elder Dragon, and that is Kushala Daora. I think Kushala is definitely a solid Elder Dragon, and as a flagship it is a solid monster choice, but I think that it is time that we do finally give the monster a break and maybe have a game or two where we don't have a Kushala Daora, implement some new Elder Dragon that can utilize wind abilities. I think this is one of the few monsters on the list that I think is quite hard to rank easily, but just for the reasons I've already listed, I think he is going to go straight to the top of the B tier. Definitely not A tier worthy in my opinion, not anymore at least. I think just over time my love for the monsters kind of just dwindled ever since World. I think World was the first time where I noticed how annoying the wind abilities could be, and I think in World especially they did kind of overdo it with its moveset on how the hurricanes would form and all sorts, just pushing you all over the map. I think they did overdo it a slight bit too much in Monster Hunter World with its moveset. It did just get quite annoying to get pushed around by its wind currents, not even being hit by the monster or hitting the monster yourself, you're just being pushed around by wind and nothing is escalating. And of course in Rise I feel like they did tone it down a bit. Overall I think he just sits nicely in the middle of the tier list. Next up we have another 3rd generation flagship, and that is Lagiacrus. So I think this is a very easy decision once again. He's going to shoot straight to S tier. Lagiacrus I think was arguably one of the most iconic monsters of the 3rd generation, if not the most iconic monster, and of course it was one of the main monsters that we associated with the underwater combat. His monster design was extremely cool, and I think they did a really good job with its use of its elements, of course with the various glows that the monster obtains, and just in general it was an extremely scary monster to fight, and especially when you were underwater it was terrifying. And for those of you who have played 3 Ultimate, you would remember how it appeared when you were doing a gathering quest, I think it was, or it was like slay 5 sharks or something silly like that, and then he just appeared out of nowhere and you just pretty much had to run from Lagiacrus, as I think he has infinite health during that quest. And just overall it was a really awesome encounter. I think many would agree that Lagiacrus is at least top 15 in the entire franchise for many players, if not top 10, and just in general really awesome monster, and from my personal opinion easily one of the best monsters out of all the flagships. Up next we have our first 5th generation flagship on the list, and that is Magnemalo, Monster Hunter Rise base game's flagship monster. So my opinion for Magnemalo is definitely a bit of a weird one. I think at first I really didn't like the monster. I did think its design was a bit out there and in general just over the top, which kind of makes sense as it did take a lot from Frontier, and there is even a few moves that it has that are completely ripped from a different monster in Frontier, which I'm all for. If they are going to bring monsters from Frontier and they want to do it in a nice, simple and disguised way, where it's not literally ripping from the game but just taking various like over the top moves from there and giving it to a monster in the mainline series, I am all for that. But in general, I think the monster has a really cool design. It did grow on me over time. I think if it was when I first saw the monster, it would have been C tier, probably around the middle, maybe the top of C tier. But for now, it is actually going to be in A tier, because the monster did grow on me, as I was saying. Very cool monster design. I think especially with its turf wars, it does raise the coolness factor of this monster extremely high, as it's insane. When he's fighting a flying monster, he's literally using the explosions from his moveset to propel himself into the sky and come crashing down with the monster. It's definitely a very clever and well thought out monster, and I'm glad that we ended up getting him as the flagship on Monster Hunter Rise, as I think the game really benefited from it. I think they could have done a bit better with implementing it into the story, as they did kind of throw it to the side for the two flying Elder Dragons, which were literally the only two Elder Dragons in Rise's base game at the launch. I think they definitely could have used him more in the story, maybe even give him a Gore Magala type transformation. But yeah, overall, definitely a solid A tier monster. Coming up next, we have our next Monster Hunter Rise flagship, and of course this is for the Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak expansion, and that is Malzeno. So, Malzeno, once again, easy S tier. I think with the S tier monsters, it is very straightforward. They are an S tier for a reason. It shouldn't even be a thing where you need to think about it. With Malzeno, Vampire Elder Dragon, like what more could you ask for? It's an extremely cool concept, and I think they did really well with the design. And the fight itself was really difficult as well, which was quite nice to see in Monster Hunter Rise, as of course it did have a lot of issues here and there about difficulty. Of course this did vary from player to player, but from my playstyle specifically and how I normally play Monster Hunter games, I did have a bit of difficulty fighting Malzeno. I think it was one of the first few carts I had in Sunbreak, so that was definitely really nice to see. And yeah, not much to say here, very easy S tier monster. Next we have our final Fated 4 member, Mizutsune. So this is similar to Astalos in terms of reasoning. I think Mizutsune is a very cool monster, solid monster design, and moveset is really fun to watch and play it against. I'd say this is easily my second favourite Fated 4 member, so you know it's going to be either B tier or A tier. I think with how I feel about the monster at the time of making this video, I think it's an easy A tier. On the bottom half, definitely not better than Astalos, I would say, but it's better than Glavenus. Of course, better than Gammoth. To be honest, I'm sorry to Gammoth lovers, but I don't think there's anything worse than Gammoth on this list. That's not a bad thing though, as of course this is a flagship only tier list, so it's not the worst thing to be at C tier. And yeah, sorry for anyone who loves Gammoth once again, but I don't think there's going to be anything worse than Gammoth on this list. Up next we have Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, and of course that is Generation 2, flagship Nargacuga. So Nargacuga, it does have a strong bias for me, as of course, for those of you who might know this, Monster Hunter Freedom Unite was my first Monster Hunter game, and of course, in turn, Nargacuga was my first flagship. Very awesome monster. I think similar to Kushala Daora, I think Nargacuga's been in enough games that it warrants a bit of a break. So I am hoping that in the next Monster Hunter game, including its expansion, we don't see Nargacuga at all, as I feel like that's a lot of why Lagiacrus is so requested, is because it's only in a few select Monster Hunter games, similar to Gore Magala, and of course there are a few other monsters that also have had the same treatment, and in some cases like Dalamador and Yamasakami, they've not returned once. As much as I do love Nargacuga, he will go in A tier on the bottom side of it though, as once again I feel like the appeal to Nargacuga has dwindled for the exact same reason for Kushala Daora, maybe less of a negative reason since it doesn't have really annoying attacks like Kushala's Wind, but in general I think we could do with a slight little break for our jumping zigzag furry spike boy. But yeah, so next up we have a fellow spike boy but in a different way, more of a hedgehog way, and that is our third 5th generation flagship on this list, and that is Nergigante. So this is once again, just like with all the other monsters in this tier, easy S tier. I think from personal opinion I am going to rank Nergigante at the top of S tier for the time being. There's not many monsters to go. With Nergigante, I think, just in general, the design, I love the way they designed the monster, with the intention as well, how the fact that it's hunting elder dragons, and it's an absolute savage of a monster. I think Nergigante is easily one of my favourites, if not my favourite like flagship in the entire Monster Hunter series, and I think it was just an extremely cool design, really well implemented into the story, and I think they did a really good job with implementing Ruin and Nergigante in the story of Iceborne. And just in general, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but Nergigante is a solid monster in design and just its movesets, and everything about the intention of the monster I think was really well thought out, and easily one of the best, if not my favourite, flagships in the entire franchise. Right, so next up we have the icon and original flagship of the Monster Hunter franchise, and that is Rathalos. I know a lot of people do hate on Rathalos as of recently. I wouldn't say a lot of people, but I have seen comments pop up here and there of people that just don't like Rathalos, the original version of him. I think for me personally, I think Rathalos is a solid monster. Easily dives straight to the top of B tier. This is similar to the S tier monsters. I don't really think I have to think about this one. Rathalos is a solid monster. Of course, he has been in every single Monster Hunter title, so I can see why some might be fed up with him at this point, but I think it is one of those monsters that will always be in every single Monster Hunter game, similar to Rathian, and in general, just a really cool monster design. It is a generic dragon, but I think it is a good generic dragon design. And the colour palette I think was iconic, really well chosen. The red, it really gives that fiery dragon visual, and yeah, I don't think there's much to say about this one. I think it is a solid top spot in the B tier. Up next we have Seregios. Of course, some people may say this differently, Seregios. I'm going to say it's Seregios just for the sake of this video and how I usually say it. With Seregios, I think it is a very cool flagship. It is a 4th generation flagship monster. It's got a really cool concept with its spikes and its bleed mechanic, where you would have to crouch or you had to eat some kind of meat. I forgot what meat it was that would take the bleed effect away, but yeah, I think this is going to be a B tier monster just behind Rathalos. It was a really interesting concept with the monster, but to me personally, it was just another flying wyvern. Nothing too insanely special, and to be honest, it was quite annoying to fight. I do not miss fighting Seregios. I do remember like hating to fight it, and not because it was a hard monster, but more because it was just tedious fighting it, having to manage the bleed mechanic. So yeah, it will be sitting in B tier, and a lot of its reasoning for its ranking it being high B tier is simply due to how unique it was, or at least how unique it was at the time. You never know, by the time you watch this in like a 2 years time, there might be 16 monsters that can inflict the bleed mechanic. Of course, we do have Odogaron in Monster Hunter World, that also has a bleed mechanic pretty much similar to how Seregios does it. But yeah, getting back on topic, we have our next monster, and that is Generation 2's flagship, Tigrex. So with Tigrex, I think it's a very easy A tier. I'm going to put him at the top of A tier as Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. Once again, similar to how I said on Nargacuga, Monster Hunter Freedom Unite was my first Monster Hunter title, and Tigrex was your low rank little early game gate monster that just gatekeeps you and makes sure that you learn the game properly, as it was the village, I think 5-star urgent. Very scary monster. I think they did a really good job with implementing Tigrex into the story as well, as it was the first monster. I'm pretty sure it was the first proper monster that you see in the game, and it knocks your hunter off a cliff, and then you have to face it again way later. And of course, in between having to actually fight the monster and its original first appearance, you are seeing it here and there in quests where you pretty much can't fight it, as it will absolutely destroy you. And similar to the few of the other monsters on the list, like Nergigante, Tigrex is an absolute savage of a monster, and its moveset definitely shows this. Like, Tigrex was the original Nergigante dive bomb, except with Tigrex, the dive bomb is in a straight line on the ground, and it was absolutely terrifying when it would start stomping towards you, and then spin around and stomp towards you again, and you're just trying to make sure you don't get hit by it. Overall, I think it's an extremely cool monster. I wouldn't say it's S tier, but it is a very, very easy top of A tier monster. Coming up next, we have another easy S tier monster, and that is Valstrax. So Valstrax is a Generation 4, I believe. Of course, it is Monster Hunter Generations, which I think is Generation 4. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, Valstrax, extremely cool monster. It's going to shoot, no pun intended, to the top of S tier. Of course, well, sorry, at the top of the list of rankings, but not to the top of S tier. I think Valstrax, really cool monster, is a tiny bit over the top design. It is literally a jet monster. If it's going extremely fast, you could easily just mistake it for a meteorite, which I'm sure a lot of the game's analogies will do anyways. But yeah, it was the first of its kind with over-the-top designs, I think. Of course, I did say that Magna Marlow was a bit over the top in terms of its design, but I feel like Valstrax could get away with being over the top because of the art style in Generations compared to Rise. I think Valstrax is definitely a really epic monster, really solid design, and the intention for the monster I think was well executed, especially given the fact that it was over the top, and it was the first of its kind in many ways. So it's going to definitely be an S tier. I think for the time being it will be at the bottom. It's not my favourite S tier monster, but I think it's high enough on the list of flagships that made me want to play a Monster Hunter game. And next we have, joining Valstrax at the bottom of S tier, is going to be Velkhana. So this is the 5th generation flagship for the Iceborne expansion to Monster Hunter World. Easy S tier. I think Velkhana is easily up there with some of the coolest Elder Dragons in the Monster Hunter franchise. I think I'm going to place Velkhana. It's a bit of a hard one. I'm going to put Velkhana in the middle. I think it does have a bit of a bias towards it for me personally, as I did play World a lot in comparison to Generations and Rise. So of course a lot of the monsters that you do see here do have a lot of ties to, of course, the games that I played the most, which I guess makes sense, as I feel like a lot of aspects build up in a said Monster Hunter game to becoming the reason as to why you play them a lot. I think Velkhana has a very solid design, really cool moveset. It's very fitting of the expansion that it was representing, and the overall design and just everything about the monster for an ice monster, especially an ice elder dragon, I think they did extremely well. It was a really fun fight, and yeah, I think the way they implemented it into the story as well was really well done. So because of that, it's going to get a very easy, nice number 4 spot on our list of flagships. And finally, last but not least, we have the 3rd generation flagship, Zinogre. So Zinogre, I'm sure many will probably want to have it in S tier or A tier, some maybe even in B tier. It was the most hunted monster of Monster Hunter World, so maybe a lot of that had to do with people hating the monster. I'm assuming it wasn't that, it was probably because of the decoration farm. For me, and of course my own opinion, I will be putting Zinogre at the... It's going to be an A tier monster, that's for sure. As of course with the S tier monsters, like I said, it's a no-brainer for me when I put a monster in S tier, as I feel like if you're trying to think about if it's in S tier, it's pretty much not an S tier monster. I think for A tier, I'm going to put Zinogre just behind Tigrex. Actually, behind Magna Marlow. So Zinogre has been placed in the upper half of A tier. So I think it's a really solid monster. Once again, really cool moveset, especially with like its G rank variations in the various games it's been in. They did a great job with how it interacts with its environment as well, especially with how it interacts with thunderbugs and the way it draws in its power. I think this falls under the same category as Nargacuga and Kushala Daora and a few other monsters on this list. Not all of them, there's very few select monsters on the Flagships list, but I feel like there are a few monsters here and there in Monster Hunter that have kind of shown up a bit too much. I think they do deserve a little bit of a break, just so we can miss them a bit for when they do actually return. And of course this just gives more space for monsters that haven't appeared as often, or even just new monsters as a whole, to appear in Monster Hunter games. And we did see with Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak how we were getting a tiny sprinkle of Monster Hunter Frontier. I think it would be really cool if we could see some more Frontier monsters, which are pretty much new monsters for us. But yeah, that is where Zinogre is going to be placed. I did go off on a tiny bit of a tangent. It is a very solid monster, very fun to fight, but I think it's getting a bit too easy to fight now, just simply because of how much it's appeared in the recent Monster Hunter titles. And yeah, very fitting monster for Portable Third as well. I do want to mention that with Monster Hunter Portable Third's theme and just in general the game's aesthetic, I think Zinogre was a very solid flagship monster. And with that said, that does bring us to the end of this video, guys. That is the tier list finalised. I am pretty happy with how I've placed these monsters out. Of course, this is my personal opinion once again, so do drop your own rankings down below. And I will put the link to this tier maker in the description if you guys want to use it yourselves, and even just post a screenshot in the Discord or even in the comment section of this video. Assuming that you're allowed to post links. I'm not sure if you are, but if you're not allowed to post links in the description, or sorry, the comment section of this video, then be sure to join our Discord and drop your tier list in there. I might even go as far as creating a tier list channel in our Discord, so that's just even better incentive for you to complete this tier list and drop it in there. But yeah, guys, let me know down below how much you agreed with this tier list. Of course, once again, this is completely subjective, so don't be going telling someone else in the comment section or in the Discord that your tier list is objectively better than someone else's, as of course this is once again all your opinion. As always, a like would be extremely appreciated if you did enjoy the video. It does help with the channel a ton, and it's just very appreciated, as of course these videos do take a bit of time to record and edit. Be sure to subscribe for a lot more Monster Hunter content. Of course, there will be a lot more on the way. And don't forget to join our Discord. As I mentioned previously, we will be dropping the tier lists in there, and there's lots of other awesome Monster Hunter players in there if you're looking for someone to play with or to chat with in general. Just really cool place to be. So be sure to join the Discord, links at the top of the description. And thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.